So I'm going to respond to Professor Anton here. Hey Corey, thanks for your interesting comments and for opening up some new sites of inquiry. I'm particularly interested in this notion of the role of philosophy in international relations and the cosmic dimension of those relations. Um, my last video that Corey was responding to was about philosophy and democracy. And what I didn't mention or get into in that video is the extent to which, given our current circumstance, given the current ecological crisis that our species is facing and that we have created, it's important that we learn to extend democracy to all species. And international relations isn't just the relations between human nations anymore. We need a form of planetary politics that is Gaian in its extent and focus. In other words, we need a democracy of all beings, human and non, because we're in the midst of a mass extinction. 20 to 50,000 species are going extinct every year. The normal background rate of extinction is closer to 5 species a year. We have climate change, which is already going to devastate coastal habitats for humans and other beings, and completely remake the surface of the planet in the coming decades and centuries. There's no turning back from that. We already have to face that issue. It's only a question of how much worse we're going to allow this to become before we take action. There's the concept of cosmopolitics that the Whiteheadian philosophers, Isabel Stengers and Bruno Latour and others have been developing, which is an attempt to rethink human identity so that we don't so sharply isolate and separate ourselves from the rest of the kingdoms of life. Certainly we are special and unique in several ways, but since the Enlightenment really, or even before that, with the scientific revolution and the basically Cartesian way of conceiving of our identities as thinking beings which exist not only over and above our own bodies, but over and above the living beings in the natural world all around us. It's that kind of thinking that has allowed the techno-industrial capitalist system to completely decimate and destroy the planet. Because we, due to this form of identity that has been enculturated into all Western democratic liberal human beings, we don't see our relationship to the world around us, and we fail to recognize the ways in which pumping chemicals into the so-called environment out there is basically, no different than taking a syringe and pumping them right into our own bodies, because everything is connected. The contaminated water in the river, at higher elevation is going to come right down and get into the crops that I eat, and so on. I mean, people understand this now, but we're still treating ecology as a science, an objective science that doesn't necessarily have anything to tell us about values or about our own identities. It hasn't permeated our culture yet to the extent that it needs to. Basically, we need to fundamentally reinvent the human being, the human sense of identity. And if we don't do this very quickly, if we don't generate a form of education capable of raising the next generation in such a way that it recognizes its links and connections with the natural world, then our species will certainly go extinct, or at least if some human beings survive in a sort of backwater existence, our civilization as we know it will collapse. within a century. I'm convinced. So, finding a way to enter into democratic relationships with non-human beings such that we consider their needs and their values independent of the values of the human marketplace is crucial. To get back to philosophy's role in all of this, there's this issue of the individual and what is the individual really. Corey was pointing out the ways in which individuality has been co-opted by consumer capitalism, which panders to a sort of narcissistic form of individuation, where the ego will invest in self-help techniques in order to become the best self that it can be. And of course, this is a sort of narcissistic, solipsistic form of individuation, which only includes the other and the relationship, the authentic relationship to others, to the extent that others are impressed by or jealous of our own accomplishments. Or our own clothing, our own vehicle, our own three-story house, or what have you. There's a sort of competition between individuals to see who can be the most authentic and who can be the most sort of self-possessed and in control of their lives. And usually, we measure this by money and by material acquisitions. That's not the kind of individuation that I was talking about in my video, of course. Individuation is a term that I associate with the school of psychology that comes out of Carl Jung's work. And for him, the psyche has this natural tendency to individuate. There are various ways in which it can veer off the path of individuation, of course, and Jung would say, we certainly don't live in a culture geared towards true individuation. We live in a society oriented around the mass, where groupthink rules our lives, our self-perceptions, our perceptions of others. And this is more true today than it was in Jung's time because of the various forms of mass media that mediate our perception of each other and of the world. So we're in a very dangerous situation. How can philosophy help? That's an important question. What place has the individual had in the history of philosophy? What place has democracy had in the history of philosophy? Many people would point to Plato's Republic and say, well, if Plato truly is a sort of paradigm example of the philosopher in the Western tradition, then democracy doesn't fare so well. Plato and Aristotle, they thought that democracy inevitably leads to tyranny because the minds of the masses can easily be manipulated by a skilled rhetorician, a skilled speaker. And we have plenty of examples of this, in fact, being the case, where a nation of seemingly free-thinking individuals was pushed in rather frightening directions by a demagogue, such that they were willing to, systematically exterminate certain races, etc. So, we shouldn't be so quick to dismiss Plato's fears of democracy. I think it's a mistake to think of Plato as a especially conservative thinker, because in his historical context, the form of government that he invented in the Republic was actually rather progressive. Women, the place of women was better than any existing society in his time. Um, Really, it was the Republic is a picture of a meritocracy where the best at each particular job and role in society take on that role, and there's a mutual agreement between all the participants in the society that is how it should be. Um, I don't think that the Republic is a viable model, of course. I mean, Plato tried it in Syracuse, it didn't work out so well. Um, and he later wrote The Laws, which was a sort of scaled back uh, version of the best possible city, more of a constitutional monarchy, not ruled by philosopher kings in the same way. But if we fast forward, you know, to millennia, to the German idealists, and consider the role of the state and of the individual in a thinker like Hegel's system or political philosophy, it seems like, again, for Hegel, the state takes precedence over the individual because, the idea, the concept, the absolute sort of utilizes the individual as a means to its realization in history. The individual is sort of just um, the means of the idea's incarnation into history, and the individual is disposable, really. So we can contrast that with someone like Schelling, who would say each individual has to create their own system. Schelling titled one of his early publications "My System of Philosophy," which really aggravated Fichte, who thought there was only one universal form of philosophy. And Hegel would agree that philosophy can't be mine or yours. There's only one system. It's universal, and each individual has to conform to it. For Schelling, who had a more artistic, aesthetically sensitive, and creative mode of philosophizing, the point is for each individual to create their own system, to create a systematic form of wonder, as Corey put it, that reconciles themselves at a deep, authentic level with their own being towards death and being towards others. And, is there a universal system or ideal for philosophy? And from Schelling's perspective, yes. But we only approach it through our individuality. So rather than the individual being a means, the individual is in fact the end. The whole point of evolution, from Schelling's perspective, is individuation. Nature is becoming more personal. And for Schelling, in his sort of reformed Spinozist pantheism, nature is God, or nature is becoming God, or nature in the human is striving to become God. Each of us as individuals is striving to realize our own unique form of divinity.